What a week.
Woo! I got to see you in person. That was fun.
Yeah. I guess this is the best week for us to screw up, though.
Yeah.
Because now we're going to release the Mother's Day episode on Mother's Day. Let's keep it light because our conversation is going to get...
What are you talking about? It was a fun, fabulous, frothy, light movie. Anyways.
It was none of those things.
It was occasionally funny.
I wished that we were watching it together. I think I would have enjoyed it more if I watched it with anybody. Because it was
bleak.
it was very miserable. It was a very rough experience. So what I did was I bought myself a fountain pen.
To deal with the stress?
Yeah, this is my gift for myself. And it's not whatever one of the fancy ones, whatever that brand is that Wes Anderson makes ads for. It's not one of those $500 fountain pens.
Why not?
Because there are other things I'd rather spend $500 on. Welcome to Meaning What? I'm Mason Hershenow.
And I'm Sean Ang with new improved technology.
We finally got Sean to come down here, and pick up the goddamn microphone that's been in my hallway waiting for them for months.
And now it's going to sound much better.
And that's good.
Yes, it is. Yes.
It is. We've only been doing this podcast since 2021 with a hiatus in there. But it took you how long to buy a real microphone? Is my point.
Well, I had that shitty other one that was sort of real.
Oh, there it is. That you bought for the aesthetics.
It was $50. I can be like the Andrews sisters. Anyways.
There you go. Sean, what did you make me do in honor of Mother's Day? You have to explain this one. You have the cultural context.
Yes, I made Mason watch the accidental camp classic Mommie Dearest about the most infamous mothering story of all, aka what not to let happen with your mother-daughter relationship. It is the story of Joan Crawford and her eldest adopted daughter, Christina Crawford. It is based on a salacious and scandalous memoir written by Christina shortly after Joan's death. I mean, the cultural impact or interest in it came from Joan writing out Christina and Christopher, her eldest son, out of the will for reasons they'd well know. I mean, she did donate a lot to a lot of important charities and other stuff anyways, so. This movie is, well, it's bad.
Oh, it's so bad.
It's bad.
It's famous for being bad, right? Like that's
Yes.
what you told me the appeal was.
Yes. But not, and sometimes in a fun way, but not always in a fun way. It is most infamous for Faye Dunaway's performance as Joan Crawford, which we'll talk about it. It is simultaneously amazing and terrible, and nowhere in between.
And really the best part of the entire movie, which sort of sets the whole tone.
Yeah. I think, I guess the, cultural context here to think about, I guess, is Joan Crawford, that movie actress herself, was part of the golden age of Hollywood through the studio system, I'm not an expert on it, but a vague fan of the studio system, but was best known as someone who was very dutiful to the system, always played by the rules, was always very obedient, did whatever was told of her, was a rags to riches story. She came from a very bad childhood, and made it up as one of the big stars in the 20s and 30s. And her persona, because every every golden age Hollywood actress and actor got their persona was that, like, tough as nails, smart cookie, scrappy girl who makes it. But she also, like, evolved with the times, yada yada. We'll talk. It comes up in the movie. She gets dropped by MGM because her movies start not doing well because they keep giving her shitty roles that she has to save. And then she makes her big Oscar win with, oh, what the fuck was that movie called? Yeah, thank you, David. Mildred Pierce, which she played that movie. If you even just read the summary of the book, that book is some weird shit. Again, also her playing a mother with a very, very codependent, weird relationship with her daughter, who, like, betrays her. But is also inevitably about that. And this movie, I guess, well, it doesn't. I don't know if it really does, but I feel like it's attempting to, like, show the other side of Joan, but it does a very bad job of it, right? I feel like we don't get to know Joan Crawford as a person. And I found, like, if I didn't have that context of what Joan's, like, arc of career was, it does a very bad job of, like, cluing you in. It kind of just drops you in and assumes you know these things.
Right, 100%. I think that's it. And in 1981, is that when this film came out?
You know, and it's like a couple years after her death, so, like, maybe
you would know who Joan Crawford is, and you would probably be some level of familiar with this story too, right? Like,
yes,
because the adopted children were very well publicized and all of that, and so that would be in the cultural mindset as this film came out. The book came out in 1978, so, you know, a fairly short time frame, especially then, for this turnaround. So I could see why they would not feel the need to fill you in on anything, because this is, like, you know, popular culture at the time. It introduces us to Joan Crawford as her career is starting to stall, and she decides that she really wants to have a child, but she can't conceive, and she's unmarried. And so when she goes and she applies for adoption, she's already had a divorce, and she's single, and it's the 1940s, and so she's automatically denied. And
it takes her lawyer fuck buddy to make some work happen.
Right, which is an immediate, you know, like, hey, maybe this isn't a good thing, right? Because the baby is obtained through probably extra legal means, which there is some question about that.
Yes,
in the real story. And so very quickly, she adopts this blonde-haired baby girl, names her Christina, and later adopts a blonde-haired boy, names him Christopher. And Joan lavishes Christina with attention and luxury. We are sort of introduced to her at her birthday party.
Yes.
Right.
We have to talk about, there's a lot of whiplash cutting. Like,
yeah.
You have the baby. Aww. Whoosh, her third birthday party or something. And you're like, okay.
The pacing of this movie is
awful.
Awful. And I can't help but wonder if that is part of what makes it so difficult to begin with.
Yes.
Because it's not that it's hard to follow at all. And it's a very straightforward story in a lot of ways, but there are no transitions between anything. It's just a series of things happening, you know, and there's not always a clear connection between them. But that is an excellent example. Like, we see the baby, and then we cut almost immediately to the third or fourth birthday party or whatever it is.
And then we find out Joan is it's just not portrayed very well, but Joan is maybe a strict mother, a bit tyrannical, and it feels like it's trying to indicate, you know, Joan's mental state is unwinding as she deals with this difficult time after she is forced to leave MGM because of her movies not being successful, and they make the fun reference to the infamous box office poison ad in which heads of movie theaters would like put out a list of like, we don't want movies from these people anymore. You pay them too much. Their movies don't bring people into seats. Fuck you. And it actually apparently was was very effective because it was an excuse for the major studios to dump the big stars who were box office poison, which happened to be mostly women. Funny.
Mm-hmm.
So Joan got dumped, then made her big career leap to a different studio and made her Oscar-winning movie Mildred Pierce. We get to see her legendarily accept her Oscar at home because she's too much of a control freak.
Mm-hmm.
And then we watch as her career wanes again. She marries a Pepsi Cola guy and like actually marries this guy. And all the while, Christina is just a sanctimonious little perfect baby who, acts out when Joan is unfair to her. She gets sent away to boarding school, and that ends badly, and more end-of-life Joan stuff. Like the very funny and the very impossible Christina inevitably becomes an actress on a soap opera. And then when she becomes very ill with ovarian cysts, Joan steps in to play her on the soap
Which
opera.
is a thing that happened in real life.
That is amazing.
Joan Crawford came in and played a 20-something-year-old. It played the same role.
Yes.
In the soap opera. Incredible.
Absolutely incredible. Joan dies. Christina and Christopher are written out of the will. It is played as though as Christina, was willing to reconcile with her mother, understood, the error of her ways, and, was okay with learning and growing from it, then is upset when she's written out, and that is apparently the genesis for the tell-all.
The tell-all book. So, why is this film important? Because it was panned by critics.
Yes.
And it has had its own sort of renaissance. And so before we start digging into it, because there's a lot that I want to talk about here, and there are a lot of things that this film sort of symbolizes for me about problems with the biopic in general, Hollywood in general.
Oh,
right?
yeah.
But there's a cultural importance to this film, right?
Sadly, or gratefully, it is a camp classic. And I think the context there is Joan herself is a gay icon. She was very supportive of gay people and donated to a lot of very important charities and was openly supportive of gay people in a way only very few famous people were as she was alive. So I think it's a little bit of somewhat honoring her memory. But the movie, it gets sort of to the notes on camp thing. I think Faye Dunaway's performance does, which is why it is celebrated as a camp classic for all of her infamous outbursts. All those speeches have been said ad nauseum by every gay person ever, by every drag queen ever, since the 80s, dressed up as the various stages of her fabulousness. And it kind of appropriately gets to the core of Notes on Camp, where it's it is so, at least Faye Dunaway's performance is so deadly serious in what she thought was going to be an Oscar-winning tour de force performance, that when it doesn't land, its sincerity is at least there.
Yeah, she is bringing 100% to this role.
I don't know, 2,000%. She is chewing and wood chipping the scenery and anyone around her. Apparently, in some of the takes, the writer at the end of the scene, Faye got so physical, she actually, hurt her to the point, physically beat the shit out of her.
And this is happening only a couple of years after Chinatown, right? And it could not be a more opposite performance and a less, well-handled performance either, which was one thing that was really fascinating to me about this film and Dunaway talked about it later, about how she felt like she really would have benefited from this film having a director who could direct, right?
Yeah.
And that is clear. Like, she didn't get along with Roman Polanski either, but he knew what he was doing. But also, she was playing off of Jack Nicholson in his prime,
Yes.
and
everyone else here is a dud muffin or unremarkable.
Yeah, and how much of that is the direction, how much of that is the writing, how much of it is just them as actors. But it's like Faye Dunaway took all of the energy out of the set and all of the spotlight and left nothing for anybody else who just couldn't even measure up,
I feel like it still carries, both performances tell you like what Faye Dunaway's signature is. Like, there's a severity, there's an intensity, there's a eyebrows in two very opposite ways. But it, like, Chinatown so effectively like keeps it at a simmer, and you can see like the danger and mystery and some actual vulnerability that feels like measured. And this performance is all severity and angles, and like, yeah, none of it feels vulnerable. But that, I don't think that's her fault.
No, I don't think so either, because Chinatown demonstrated how, if there was ever any doubt, how good of an actress she actually is, and how well she can nail the femme fatale and all of the like little things that come with that, all of the finer details. She has an amazing sense of emotion and of delivery and of all of that. And she was bringing that to this role, I think, but nobody said, "Hey, you're here. We need you down here."
Hey, well, it did bring the one moment from Chinatown that we thought was hokey, right? When she's like, she's my daughter and my sister or whatever, right? That's that scene. Sadly, Mommie Dearest is just that scene times
for 2 hours.
Times 3 for 2 hours.
2 hours.
Okay, shall we get into it?
Yeah.
The first, 5 minutes of the movie, worked. It showed Joan. Well, first of all, anytime the movie was about Joan, it was way better than it was about Christina, who, especially Christina the adult, terrible wig, no personality. The acting was so bad to the point you can't tell if it was bad on purpose.
Yeah.
The first 5 minutes kind of worked to show but not tell us about this fastidious woman, maybe too fastidious. Her morning routine, she's very sexy. That scene in her all pink shower when she's about to fuck the guy and the hair melts because it's permed to death, but also she looks so 80s, and it is, none of the movie is set in the 80s. Everything about this movie looks like the 80s.
You can tell that it was made in the 80s. It's 80s colors, and it's 80s faces, and it's 80s, it's 1940s clothing with an 80s flair. Just a side note, my favorite part of that scene where they get in the shower together is that scene begins with him putting a towel around his waist because he's nude, and he puts that towel around his waist, and he walks 5 feet over to the door of the shower and takes the towel off.
Yes.
And then gets in the shower and leaves this towel on. So he put the towel on. Probably they were thinking, oh, this will show the Joan Crawford monogram on it and all of that. But it's this awkward, well, we can't show a guy's bare ass. So we're going to show him fixing this towel on and then walking a couple feet over and taking the towel off.
Did you hate or find it at all useful that the opening scene of her neuroses, I'm not mad at you, I'm mad at the dirt?
I don't know.
I'm like, is she really like that? Is my first thought.
I mean, it's trying very hard to set up very quickly her as this person who is unstable, right? And I think that that is one of the biggest shortcomings of this film is that there is zero nuance in anything, right? There's some interesting things about the way the film starts with her morning routine that could really set things up, but they just keep piling on. And this film is a really good example of why the idea of show don't tell is golden in movie making, right?
Right.
Because
at least it tried in the first 5 minutes, but yeah, the rest is just telling us she is bad and mentally unwell. When there's more interesting ways to do it.
But it also, like, I've never seen a film about an alcoholic that is so afraid to show anyone drinking anything, right?
Yeah.
There are many moments where drinks are poured, but there aren't even that many, and you very rarely see her with a drink in her hand, much less actually taking a drink. The implication is supposed to be that she, especially later on in the movie, is just drunk all the time. But she's never actually drinking, you know?
There's only the one scene where she's passed out drunk that, like, tries to say anything.
Right. And Christina, who is old enough to know better, runs in and thinks that her mom is dead, which is another thing. It's like either her alcoholism got so bad while you were at boarding school that you've never seen your mom drunk, but also she's famously an alcoholic. So you're also, what, 16? You would have an idea, I would think. I don't know.
Because this is written from Christina's perspective, she is a Pollyanna, she is a saint who did nothing wrong ever.
Who literally goes to the nunnery and gets fixed by a nun.
I guess we should also just run through the, like, famous camp scenes, and we can talk about how they're terrible. That's because those are the only scenes that are any, like, fun to watch, or they're icky to watch. They're actually, some of them were more icky to watch than I thought they would be.
Yeah, and I think you and I, we came into this from very different directions, and I think that is going to be where I think we landed in the same space.
Yes, but
with much of the same opinion, but we were coming at this primed in very different ways. So
the swimming, that can't be real, right? The swimming part is so funny to me. She keeps racing her tiny, like, 6-year-old daughter in swim races, and says, when she tries to stop, she says, "Quitter!" And it keeps beating her. "I am bigger you, and will always be faster and better than you." And you're like, okay, hitting herself with a hammer.
But, I have known people with abusive mothers who did stuff like that, and would talk about that stuff. And so it was very believable. It was also setting it up like this daughter is going to, like, Christina is going to drown, or have a scary moment that way. And I thought that was going to be the first instance of abuse.
Like something.
But it's not. She just, what it is when she throws her and locks her in the pool house,
Yes, because she misbehaves.
And there's a very good instance of where the pacing and editing gets thrown off, because after that we immediately go into a scene where Joan Crawford is running, exercising with her secretary who's driving a car next to her.
Yes.
And she comes back and she's looking for Christina. And I'm thinking, oh my God, she left her in the pool house.
Yes.
Locked up down there.
Oh, shit.
But it's a different day.
Yes.
It's an entirely different day. And what it is a different opportunity for her to abuse Christina. She comes down and sees Christina pretending to be her mom and doing her own hair and all of this. But they wait so long to reveal that, and there's been zero transition and zero information.
Yep.
I spent the whole time, like, expecting a different horrific thing, so that when the actual moment of abuse came up, I was like, what the fuck is going on?
And, like, the thesis that Christina is alleging to us is that Joan felt competitive towards her, which is a classic mother-daughter trope, but also, like, the film makes it very, sadly, the film makes it very unconvincing because Christina is such boring, blasé dud. Like, an actress who was not successful, who makes it on a soap opera? That was what Joan was concerned about? Really?
Well, the idea, I guess, being that the daughter is always a threat to the aging mother who only has her youth
For so
about her, right?
Yeah.
But it doesn't present that thesis very succinctly at all.
Well, or coherently, yeah.
And you have little moments where you kind of get the sense that that is happening. And maybe that's another thing that would be more clear if we saw this when it came out, right? But it doesn't even really make that argument. And by the end of the film, they love each other, you know, and they have this love for each other and talk about it. And then you have the like turn when she cuts them out of the will.
Okay. The wire hanger scene, which is ostensibly the most famous quoted piece of, like, this movie, or it's like its cultural starring point. And this was after she got the role, right? This was after she got Mildred Pierce.
Yeah, I believe so.
Yeah, this is like after the chronology again. It gets very mushy, right? Because we can't ever trust the chronology. But she finally gets the role of Mildred Pierce, yada yada, and then I guess in her like neurotic like needing to check on everything, goes and checks on the children's closet and flips the absolute motherfucking fuck out because there are wire hangers in the closet instead of the nice proper ones for her, the expensive clothing she buys for Christina and Christopher. The scene was terrifying and not actually fun. Like, it's just funny to, like, the clip without context of Joan Crawford, Faye Dunaway as Joan Crawford wearing a face mask, like face cream. No wire hangers ever! But the fact then she, like, takes it out on this child, like, beats the child with it. And David, who I watched it with, made a great point, was like, is this like a bad abortion metaphor?
I had the same thought because it's so on the nose. And I could see how that one line delivery could be taken out of context and turned into a meme. And I get that. But by the time this scene happens in the film, it's been an hour of misery. And then you have this moment that is very visceral and very realistic child abuse. Like it's believable.
Yes.
It is.
It's not fun because it's a little too real.
Yeah. Yeah. And it's brutal, you know, and it keeps going.
Right. Then she forces the kid to clean, Christina to clean. It is funny because then Joan like runs off into fury of anger or whatever about cleaning. And then Christina sits there with powder all over her face as like a 7-year-old and says, Jesus Christ, like almost to camera.
Yeah. Is this an SNL skit? What are we doing?
Right. What was that? Again, that's supposed to be some sort of positive moment for Christina of being wise.
Well, and then she says that a couple of other times in the movie.
Right. And you're like, that's her signature line?
That's her signature line an hour into the film.
Oh, God. Right. There's the nonsensical, after she wins the Oscar and like her fans literally celebrate with her, rose cutting scene in the garden where she gets all bloodied and makes the kids do the destruction of the garden with her. And Tina, bring me the axe.
Which, great line delivery there.
Me or Faye? Or both?
Both.
Yes.
Both. You nailed it. You nailed
Yes.
Faye's performance.
Yes.
But again, just like for me, and...
Oh, that happens right before Mildred Pierce. The Tina bring me the axe. Then Wire Hangers happens after Mildred Pierce. Got it.
Yeah.
It all merges together.
Well, it does, because there aren't any landmarks in this film, right? It's just a series of things that happen and they kind of turn into soup all in your brain. But it is just a parade of misery. And that scene where she calls the kids out to the garden and she's presumably drunk and she's lost her job and she's going to lose the house, she thinks, but then they don't because they're still in it later on.
Yeah. So such a non-issue.
And tears up the garden, chops down the tree. Like, again, that was very real. I want to make clear my parents are wonderful and I had a pretty happy childhood, but like I've known people with abusive parents who talk about this sort of stuff, and like there is a way you have bad characters who do bad things in films, right? And there's a way to present them where you can have empathy for them, and that's what makes a good villain, is having empathy for the individual no matter what terrible things they're doing, or in spite of their terrible things, or you build up this empathy and then they do something awful and then you have to reflect on yourself. This film does a terrible job of setting that up. And instead it becomes just a series of these horrific little dioramas and these terrible things that are happening, which are very real and believable depictions of child abuse with very little redemption for anybody in between. It's just like awful thing, awful thing, awful thing. And it's like torture porn or something. It's just this. And it's weird that those moments feel so real in a film that is so fake and so badly done.
It's almost like those are real and not like. It's clear that Christina's also a terrible writer, right? Like that's part of the product and issue of it. And like the fact that those feel so real means, damn, that shit happened to her. She's not good enough of a writer or a creative to like make that shit up. So it makes me believe her that shit happened. Yikes. But it is not presented with any shade or nuance or understanding. Or even like it could have been, this movie could have explored Joan's mental illness, but it makes no attempt at doing so.
Right. You could see a version of this film that is from Joan Crawford's perspective, and
that would be way better.
And it gets mixed up with, there's lack of clarity or something. Like that would be a much more complex sort of presentation. One of the big things that has been pointed to about this film is that the later children that Crawford adopted, particularly the twin girls, don't remember any of this, which is also doesn't mean that parts of it didn't happen or any of it didn't happen, right? Because it is, I've seen it. Like it's to have one child who is abused, and then the younger children usually who don't see any of it and don't know their parent to be that way, right? That is totally and absolutely believable. And that complicates this as well, because we have this story that is coming from originally an unreliable narrator, and who doesn't make a great case for herself, Christina, right? There's a lot of reasons to doubt parts of her story, and especially things that she does later on. But then a lot of that doubt also lines up with plausibility as well. And so obviously nobody's ever going to know what really happened. The book came out after Joan Crawford died, so we didn't really ever get her side of the story. And then this film comes along, which further, sensationalizes the whole situation.
Right. Then after all those scenes, we are stuck with the misery of watching teenage Christina get sent away to boarding school. Well, she doesn't get sent away as a teenager, as a young child, because she tries to be smart about it when she brings liquor to her mom while she's fucking one of her friends. Also, that's right before, as Joan Crawford is warming up, where she sticks her leg high up. That's cunt, kids. Iconic. She said, I still got it.
Mm-hmm. Good for you, Joan.
Yeah, that's Misery. Because Adele Christine is a terrible actor who wants to be an actress. She acts in like a scene from Antigone, I think, and it is so bad.
It's one of the worst readings of Antigone I think I've ever heard.
Oh my God, you and I could read it cold better. What the fuck was that? And I think it's supposed to be viewed as good.
Well, yeah, because the boy is like all about it, but maybe he just wants to,
fuck her,
get up in her nylons. But, which he does, and then that gets her kicked out of boarding school, right?
Which, Joan gets tyrannical about, yada, yada. Right. Oh, it just happens to have to bring her home from boarding school, but she has an important interview there with Barbara.
Right.
A reporter, yeah. And then
beats the shit out of her.
Chokes the shit out of her because Christina gets to say, I'm not one of your fans. Ah! Why don't you give me the respect I am entitled to?
And calls her a liar in front of the reporter.
Yeah.
For things that she was lying about, to be fair. So let's take a break. And when we come back, I want to talk a little bit about the fact that this is a subculture touchstone and why we both left this film feeling kind of gross about that. And we're back. Sean, I am but a lowly straight man, and I don't appreciate the finer arts. I understand why drag is important, and I appreciate it as an art form.
Yes.
I am not the target audience, and I don't get it.
Yes.
So I was curious when you told me that this film has had such an influence on that world. And I agreed to watch this movie because that feels important.
Yes.
Now, having done that,
woof,
I don't feel so good.
I mean, we see symptoms of it today where it's like, it's irony poisoning to the point it's no longer ironic. I mean, that's part of pop culture and like culture broadly. In fact, maybe even worse in our current times. But gay people did it first. We have always supported terrible things, and like the joke on the internet is everyone loves this obscure artist that no one has ever heard of. That's terrible, but she's a woman, so that's great.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I can, in the abstract, I can see why this would be appealing if you were looking for inspiration for drag. Right? It's a huge, bombastic character with over-the-top dress and over-the-top painted-on eyebrows and over-the-top wigs and an over-the-top performance. And so, like, I could understand why you would pull from this. But it's, like, you almost have to consume it in the abstract for that to work. Because as soon as I sat down with this and tried to
engage with it,
engage with the whole thing, I don't know, man. I didn't want to watch this movie. Like, even Crash, I kept watching because it was bad, right? And I needed...
it was fun in its terribleness.
Yeah, and you could laugh at it. And I wanted to find moments to do that here, and maybe I could have if I was not watching it by myself, but I don't think I could have. Like, it's a miserable movie. And it's a movie that is so determined to not find joy and not provide you with any joy. There's very little humor. And some of it, I think, is just that the humor falls flat, but it's also just humorless. It's a movie about people who are torturing themselves and each other.
Yeah. And, like, I mean, the last two examples I had lined up are, like, two opposites of, like, where I think one thing worked and one didn't. just like we talked about before the break, that scene where she chokes the shit out of Christina in front of the reporter. The line is, "Barbara, please!" I mean, which is funny because the way she performs it is hilarious, but in context is so icky. She's choking the shit out of her out of her daughter in front of the reporter that she allegedly has this important interview with. Doesn't sound like it's that important, frankly. And it's like telling this reporter is trying to intervene, and she's like, "Back off!" What?
What?
Ooh.
And we're supposed to watch this for fun?
I think it only worked, and like you brought up an interesting point, and I want to like say like like in cultural context, drag is great because it is a mirror that is a reflection upon society, and yes, it is done through heightened stakes, vis-a-vis usually through glamour of some form or some exaggeration, typically glamour. But yes, the way it has stripped all of this of context, of really icky context, is no bueno.
Yeah.
And then more complaints about the pacing of the movie, and then we have to bring up like the way they choose the bits of Joan's life feels really like, ugh. So she finally marries successfully after all that to like a Pepsi Cola board member, chairman.
The president of Pepsi Cola, Alfred Steele.
Which hilariously in real life, she like would like always hold a Pepsi can like in every press picture in that era, very funnily.
Well, yeah, she became the spokeswoman for Pepsi. Like she was the driving force for selling Pepsi. Amazing.
And like, yeah, good for her because I don't think anyone drinks Pepsi, or like I like Coca-Cola better.
I'm a Pepsi man myself.
But
my mom drank Pepsi when I was a kid, and
thanks to Joan, possibly thanks to Joan.
I guess so, but also, I don't know, blind taste tests, people enjoy Pepsi more.
Yes, I remember that.
And there's some interesting ideas about color theory there, that like red is more exciting, and so you engage with it more. I'm a Dr. Pepper man, really, but you know,
I don't drink soda. I'm better than everyone.
I don't drink it very much either. But if I am gonna have a soda, I'm gonna have a Dr. Pepper, and if I'm gonna have a cola, it's gonna be a Pepsi.
Yeah, and then she basically allegedly bankrupts said president of Coca-Cola, building this ridiculously expensive New York apartment. And then when he dies, which she had to take out a shit ton of loans because she bullied him into it, like borrowed against Pepsi Cola for. She's at the board, and they're like, "Hey, we're releasing of your duties, yada yada. So sad he's dead." And then she goes on a tirade, and like this one works because there's no child. I think because there's no child abuse attached to it, and it's just a woman who is just so absurd in her threats. Don't fuck with me, fellas. I've fought worse monsters for years in Hollywood.
I would love the like totally fictionalized story of the like Joan Crawford type taking over the great soda company. Like there's a great idea for a super campy 1980s pseudo comedy in there, right? Like that.
Where she becomes
that
executive. Yes.
Yeah. And shows all the boys,
how to do it. Also in real life, she got forced off the board later anyways. And like, I think that like that move accidentally becomes that movie for 2.5 minutes. And like, you're like, aha, okay. This movie exists as something that I would watch, but in the context makes no sense.
Mm-hmm.
And like, yeah, it is not good, but at least as a quote feels less icky to bring up because it's just vague female empowerment. That's also farcical because she's bankrupting the company for that high rise where she, oh right, and the bearing wall where she like insists needs to be torn down for a window. Tear down that bearing wall and put a window where a window ought to be. Okay.
And he's just like, yes, whatever you say. The actual Alfred Steele sounds like a fascinating guy. And I want to share this little story because this is a good example, too, of how other characters kind of get flattened in this film.
Right.
Right. Like Joan Crawford.
A guy.
Yeah. Joan Crawford's totally flat and Christina's totally flat. But like any supporting character is just reduced to
2 points.
These little things.
Yeah.
Right. And there are always much more interesting things happening in real life behind the scenes. And I understand that it's not like his movie, but like, so in 1957, 11-year-old Chester Arnold Jr., this is from Wikipedia, was given 5 shares of Pepsi. But after watching The Solid Gold Cadillac, which was a 1956 comedy that was adapted from a Broadway play, and it like was making fun of big business and corporations. The boy, Chester Arnold Jr., was compelled to write to Steele. In his letter, Arnold asked Steele if having the shares that he had been gifted meant that he was, quote, crooked like those people in the movie. Steele wrote back, inviting Chester and his family to New York to meet him and see the company. Steele supplied accommodations for the family at the Waldorf Astoria. For 3 days, the family was shown around the city and spent time with Steele and Crawford. They attended board meetings and were escorted by police to one of the most elaborate ribbon-cutting ceremonies Pepsi-Cola hosted at the time. Like, that, okay, like, you know,
that
that's
would have
fascinating.
And would have, like, worked in the movie?
100%.
What the fuck?
And would have added a whole... would have added some depth to the character of Steele, but also would have been an opportunity to show Joan Crawford
in a human light.
But also like in this period where she is without her daughter, where we don't really get any further development, right?
Yeah, it just flattens everyone. It provides no context, and the material is there. And then, right, this awkward reconciling where Joan allegedly gives a gift of whatever Alfred, like a ridiculous looking pearl necklace from Alfred Steele who has now passed to Christina as a gift.
Right.
Even though she's struggling. But like, this movie would have been so much better if it was a Joan biopic that focused on the reasons for her, like, reflected on her motherhood, because then it completely glosses over what happened to baby Jane, which is another important career revival that talks about aging and sisterhood, and like would have informed more. And then like Joan is then pigeonholed into still acting in all these hagsploitation vehicles like Trog, where she like falls in love with like a Neanderthal caveman monster. Yes, Joan Crawford was making like creature horror movies in this like the 60s.
Incredible. I love the 1960s.
Called Trog, just perfect. We just gloss all over all of that, and we just get to, well, mommy's dead. I love her. Oh shit, she wrote me out of the will.
So I think that brings us to the ultimate point, which is and what ultimately is my biggest problem with this movie and then with this legacy is that
poorly made.
Well, it's poorly made, and that is another issue. Like from as a movie person and somebody who cares about filmmaking and really loves the art of filmmaking and what is possible with a film, this is a great example of what a movie should not be. And
mess.
How to do it all wrong. But by the end of the film, it makes it clear that the point of this film is to show that Joan Crawford was awful and abusive. And that is the only thing that the film is trying to communicate, right? There's no nuance to it. There's no moment where you have to reflect on yourself and what you are seeing and how you feel about it. It is shoveling abuse down your throat for 2 hours and 8 minutes. And you are left at the end. It literally ends on Christina like deciding to finally,
Spill the truth.
get revenge.
Yeah.
Right. And so this is a film that is, in trying to show somebody as a cruel individual who is purely focused on opportunity, it is a cruel and opportunistic film, right? And it only exists to depict cruelty. And then to have all of that stripped out of it, right? And to have it be a sort of meme, that is what, like, I just can't get past, because every conversation about this film should be about like how fucking evil it is, whether or not Joan Crawford was a good person. That
actually did everything right.
Right.
That is a separate question.
It's an entirely separate conversation, right? Like, why does this movie need to exist? Why did we need to make it? And why does anybody ever need to watch it? I'm so happy that I got it for free through the library, right? But why is this a thing that needs to be there and consumed if the only point of it is absolute cruelty from what it depicts and what its goal is, right? Which is to just show and abuse it. It feels like propaganda in a lot of ways.
It truly does. For example, why is Christopher written out of the will? If you watch this movie and took it as informational, there's no context for it. What did Christopher do?
He's not in most of the movie, and that is kind of accurate to to what happened to the actual real life baby, right? But we also leave out the twins who came along later who had very happy childhoods, and
Christopher apparently ran away from home a lot and got knocked up a bunch of people really early. So that would have been important context, but that feels directly deceitful to make Joan seem unreasonable as a person when there is a very simple context there.
And if she is or was truly an awful person, right? You can add these moments of complexity and humanity and still have her depicted as what she really was, right?
Yeah.
The risk of that being that if you make a character empathetic, the audience will empathize with them, right? And so if your goal is to show them as a monster, the temptation is to only make them a monster. And that is one thing to do if the story is fiction, right?
Exactly.
But
this is about real people.
This is about real people, and it is presented as fact. And
maybe that's the layer that queer audiences add to it. It is so absurd that they just treat it as fiction, but not really. These things are tied to Joan Crawford's legacy and Faye Dunaway's legacy.
Right.
Oof.
And so without having those conversations, it feels like it would reinforce that, right? And who am I to question any of that for a community that I'm not a part of? But it I felt so awful watching this entire film, and I felt awful afterward. And yeah, happy Mother's Day.
Well, you did it.
We did it. And so, as a palate cleanser, what are you consuming that isn't this film?
Nothing. Why else would you consume anything? We are, I don't know if you are, but a big Dropout fan.
Oh, yeah, I love Dropout. Yeah.
Dropout. So the most recent episodes of Game Changer, where they're, just playing an absurd game every time, have been summarily excellent and a far more interesting exercise in storytelling by just setting up a scenario and letting funny talented people just like play in the scenario with surprise.
So much on Dropout is so good, and the comedians that they have on Dropout are so good that it makes up for how awful Sam Reich is on camera.
Okay, he's the Nepo baby hire. He's in charge of the company.
100%. And I'm very happy for him, and it all worked out. And,
Yeah, you'd be more fun. We should hire you instead.
I'd like to think so. I don't know.
Yeah, you would bring like a darker energy to it, which would make it more fun.
So Sam Reich is just like too excited to be there, you know?
Yeah.
And he feels so there are moments where he's like laughing too loud or whatever, and it feels very much like the rich kid that they let play with them, you know, because he's got the cool house.
But he's a rich kid who set the thing up.
100%. And I'm happy that he saved what used to be College Humor in a way, and I'm very thankful for that, because College Humor was so important to me for so long.
But it's gotten better. Like I feel like
it has gotten way better.
It's much more funny and much more incisive than College Humor was.
Make Some Noise is so good as well.
Yes.
And all the Dimension 20 stuff is a good thing.
I haven't watched much of that, though it seems like it's also wildly successful.
Yeah.
I really should watch Dungeons and Drag Queens, because apparently it's excellent, and it's also an exciting way to watch 4 very talented drag queens learn to fall in love with D&D.
I watched the first episode of that. I think I've only watched that one, but it was great. And they're learning in real time, and it's very fun, and they're, very into it. And they have a great cast for it.
They also cast the right RuPaul's Drag Race queens for it.
Yeah.
What are you consuming media-wise that is not the misery of Mommie Dearest?
I have been re-listening to The Adventure Zone, the first season of The Adventure Zone, which was the podcast that got me excited about DMing. Right. That was the biggest inspiration to start running the game that you play in, and that we have been doing since 2017 was The Adventure Zone. It made me want to do that kind of world building and build those sandboxes. So I've been revisiting that and having a great time. And I've been listening. When this came out a few days ago, Health put a single out with fellow Roseville native Chelsea Wolfe, and we were talking about this yesterday in person, but like the sound is not anything new. It's very like
retro, actually.
Something out of the 2010s, but I just keep listening to it. I don't know. I dig it.
So in conclusion,
you can
skip this movie.
Yeah, don't watch this one. Just don't. Especially don't watch it on Mother's Day, because if you have a good relationship with your mom, it'll make you sad, and if you have a bad relationship with your mom, it'll make you sad.
Because you'll go, wait a minute, that feels,
yeah, don't do that to yourself. Instead, watch anything else, literally anything else.
Buy a Dropout subscription. I don't know.
Buy a Dropout subscription. Watch Dungeons and Drag Queens and Pirate Metallica.
It's no Sam Studios.
Well, actually.
Did I stutter?